I was posted at the western gate that morning, which means I had the angle. Brennan was 20 feet east of me at the arch, and I could see everything the delegation's man couldn't. The set of Brennan's jaw, the absolute stillness of his shoulders, and just above the second button of his tunic, the edge of a folded envelope. I am going to tell you what I know of that morning, and some of what I've guessed, because I've had 3 years to think about it, and I believe I've guessed right. The motorcade arrived at 10:15. 7 vehicles, black, long, the kind with flags on the bonnets that means someone inside them is very certain of their own importance. They came up the Aldenmere Approach Road from the southern roundabout, which is the correct approach, the approved approach, the only approach ever used by a visiting delegation at the eastern gate. 7 vehicles at a full roll, moving the way motorcades move, as if the road were built for them and everything on it is a temporary inconvenience. The lead vehicle stopped 40 feet short of the arch. That was the first thing. It stopped where it wasn't supposed to stop. The gate arch at Aldenmere's eastern approach is 11 feet, 4 inches wide at its narrowest point. The approved lane runs dead center, which gives the gate clearance on both sides and keeps the lead vehicle on the ceremonial line. Brennan's post is the right-hand pillar of that arch. He stands with his right shoulder 6 inches from the stone. 6 inches. The lead vehicle had stopped because someone inside had done the arithmetic and decided 6 inches was not enough. A man got out of the second vehicle, not the delegation itself. This was the logistics chief, the man whose job it is to move things from where they are to where they need to be and to remove anything in between. He wore a dark suit and the expression of someone who has rerouted rivers. He came up the approach road with 2 aides behind him and stopped in front of Brennan. I watched Brennan. He did not look at the man. He looked forward at the fixed point above the gate that he has looked at for 19 years, and he remained exactly as he always is. Chin level, rifle squared, white gloves immaculate, the tall bearskin adding its 1.5 feet above him, so that he seemed less like a man and more like something the gate had grown. The logistics chief spoke. I couldn't hear it from my post, but I didn't need to. I know what those conversations look like. The chief spoke, gestured at the arch, gestured at the motorcade, gestured at Brennan. Brennan said nothing, did nothing. The chief spoke again, louder. I could tell by the way his shoulders came up. Brennan's didn't. One of the aides produced a mobile phone and showed Brennan something on the screen. An authorization, perhaps, a letter of passage, something official, the kind of document that has moved things before and expected to move things now. Brennan looked forward. I want to be precise here because I've heard this described in ways that make Brennan sound contemptuous, and that's wrong. He wasn't contemptuous. He was simply not there for that. He was at his post. He was doing the thing he had been doing for 19 years, and the motorcade and the logistics chief and the mobile phone and the aides were all, in the precise technical sense, not his concern. His concern was the arch. His concern was the post. His concern was the cobblestone under his boots, the weight of the rifle in his grip, and the fixed point above the gate. The logistics chief took a step closer. I started walking. Not running. You don't run at the eastern gate. Running at the eastern gate means something is critically wrong and you are about to fire your weapon. But I moved off my post, which is something I would normally answer for, and I moved toward the arch, which tells you what I thought I was about to see. What I saw when I got within earshot was the chief's voice dropping, not softening, dropping, the way voices drop when a man is trying to make a point land without witnesses. He said, "You are a decoration. You are a ceremonial object. I'm asking you to move 2 feet to your left so that 7 vehicles carrying a foreign delegation can pass through a gate that, I will remind you, they were invited through by the household itself. Move." Brennan did not move. I stopped at the edge of the rope line. The crowd had gone quiet. There were perhaps 30 people on the public side, tourists and watchers and a school group from somewhere, and they had all put their phones up, which tells you something about what the scene looked like from the outside. The aides were behind the chief. The 7 vehicles idled behind the aides. The flags on the bonnets moved in the thin morning air. Brennan said in a voice that cost him nothing, "Sir, this post has stood at this position since 1887. I have been ordered to stand it. I am standing it." That was all he said. The chief stared at him for a long moment. He was a professional, I'll give him that, and he understood, in the way professionals understand things, that he was looking at something that was not going to move. But he was also a man who had moved motorcades through difficult places, and he was not yet ready to let a ceremonial soldier in a bearskin be the thing that stopped him. He turned to one of his aides and said something short, and the aide made a call. I was standing close enough now that I could see what I'd seen from the western gate, the edge of the envelope above Brennan's second button. It was a standard cream envelope, the kind you get from the paper shop on Aldenmere Lane, and it was folded once and tucked into his breast pocket so that only the top edge showed. I could see a date printed on the corner of what was inside. The date was today. I had known Brennan for 11 years. I knew that he had a younger sister named Kate, who had met a man from the northern counties 3 years prior, and that the relationship had proceeded in the way these things proceed, and that there had been a period of some difficulty in which Kate and Brennan had not spoken, and that the difficulty had passed, more or less, in the way difficulties pass, which is to say not completely, but enough. I knew that Kate had told him about the engagement in a letter, not a call, and that he had heard about the date in the same way. I had not known until that morning that the invitation had arrived late. I understood, standing at the rope line with 30 tourists and 7 idling vehicles, and a logistics chief making phone calls, what it had cost Brennan Lowe to dress that morning, fold the invitation into his breast pocket, and walk to the eastern gate. He had not called in. He had not asked for a replacement. He had not done any of the things a man in difficulty does when the private world asks more of him than the professional one. He had come to his post. I looked at his face. He was looking at the fixed point above the gate. His jaw was the same as it always is. His shoulders were the same as they always are. If you had walked past at that moment without knowing what was in his pocket, you would have seen nothing except a guard at a gate, immovable and clean, exactly as he is supposed to be. The aide came back to the chief. They spoke quietly. The chief straightened. He turned back to Brennan, and for a moment I thought he was going to try again. He had the look of a man recalibrating, looking for a different lever. He didn't get the chance. The door to the gatehouse opened. Aldrich Fenn is the head of household protocol at Aldenmere. He has held that post for 22 years, and before that served as a duty officer at the Northern Garrison, which means he has the bearing of a man who spent 20 years watching guards like Brennan and understands precisely what they are. He came through the gatehouse door in his formal coat, without hurrying, and crossed the cobblestones to where the chief was standing, and he did not look at the motorcade or the aides or the phones. He looked at the chief. "Good morning," Fenn said. "I understand there's been a request to relocate the Eastern Arch post." The chief began explaining. Fenn listened. He is very good at listening in a way that makes the person speaking gradually understand they should stop. The chief stopped. Fenn said, "The Eastern Arch post has stood at that pillar since the current gatehouse was completed in 1887. It has stood during 4 state funerals, 2 foreign military incursions that came within 12 miles of Mervyn, and 1 occasion when this entire forecourt was under 8 inches of standing water from the river flooding. The post did not relocate during any of those events. I am not able, in good conscience, to recommend that it relocate for a motorcade." He paused. "The approved lane runs dead center of the arch. At the approved speed of 12 miles per hour, each vehicle will have 3 feet of clearance on the guard's side. I'm told the delegation's vehicles are standard diplomatic width. That is sufficient." The chief looked at him. Fenn looked back. "I'll need to consult with the delegation," the chief said. "Of course," Fenn said. "I'd suggest doing so from the vehicle. The gate opens in 4 minutes. I watched the chief walk back to the second vehicle. I watched him get in and close the door. The two aides followed. For 3 minutes and 40 seconds, nothing on the approach road moved. The flags on the bonnets moved. A child on the public side of the rope line, part of the school group, said something to a teacher in a voice I couldn't hear, and the teacher put a hand on his shoulder and pointed at Brennan. I looked at Brennan. He was looking at the fixed point above the gate. He had not moved. He had not shifted his weight, adjusted his grip, or acknowledged in any visible way that the last 22 minutes had happened. His tunic was as correct as it had been at 6 o'clock when we dressed. His gloves were as white. The second vehicle's door opened. The aide got out and walked to Finn. They spoke for 30 seconds. The aide walked back. The second vehicle pulled forward and fell into line. At exactly 10:38, the gate opened. The 7 vehicles came through the arch, one after another, at 12 miles per hour, in the approved center lane, with 3 feet of clearance on the guard's side. As the first vehicle passed, I saw the rear window lower 2 inches, and someone, I don't know who, I couldn't see into the vehicle, looked out at Brennan for a moment before the window went back up. Brennan looked forward. The 7th vehicle cleared the arch. The gate closed. Fenn said something brief to the duty sergeant, looked once at Brennan, and walked back through the gatehouse door. The crowd exhaled. Some of them clapped, the tourists and the school group, who clap for these things because they understand them as performance. They are not wrong exactly, but they are not entirely right. The teacher from the school group was still pointing at Brennan. The child who had spoken earlier was looking at him with the particular attention children give to things they cannot fully categorize. I know what the teacher was saying. I've heard it said. I've probably said it myself, to a niece, to a neighbor's kid, on a visit day. Something about discipline, something about standing your post, something that tries to put language around what a man in a bearskin at an old stone gate actually is. I don't think language does it. I went back to the western gate. I finished my shift. At 1400, Brennan and I were stood down, and we walked together to the guardroom without speaking, which is how Brennan and I have always walked. We are not men who fill the silence. He hung up his bearskin and his tunic. He took the envelope from his breast pocket, looked at it once, and put it in his kit bag. I thought about asking. I thought about not asking. I said, "How was the crossing this morning, the eastbound?" He said, "Slow, bridge work." I said, "Right." We finished changing. At the door of the guardroom, Brennan stopped. He looked back at the row of lockers, the hanging tunics, the bearskins on their stands, in the way a man looks at a room he has looked at for 19 years and does not quite see anymore. He said, "She'll have had a good day." He said it the way he says everything, level, matter of fact, with no particular request for a response. I think he was telling himself, and I happened to be there. I said, "I think she will have." He nodded once. He went out. I stood in the guardroom for a moment longer. Through the window I could see the eastern arch. The post was empty now. The afternoon man was not yet dressed, but the cobblestone was there, and the stone pillar, and the fixed point above the gate that Brennan has looked at for 19 years and will look at tomorrow and the day after that. There is a kind of man who holds when there is nothing holding him in return, not because he doesn't feel the pull of what he's missing, not because the private world has stopped asking, because he decided a long time ago what his word was worth. The invitation was still in his kit bag. The motorcade was somewhere inside the palace walls. The post stood where it has stood since 1887. Neither did anything else.